So hi everyone, welcome to episode 1 of the Gaming Pilgrimage, where today I have Devon with me from Emblemcast, and we're going to talk about Metal Gear Solid, the 1998 stealth action game that changed video games forever, I'd say. So before we begin, I would like to take this time to thank Devon for using his time to replay Metal Gear Solid in 2020 amidst the crazy climate of today. Of 2020, and thank you for being here, taking the time to be here. Maybe for anyone.
No, I'm saying first time playing for me.
That's right. This is your first time. This is my second time ever replaying it. I haven't replayed it since like 2009, so it's been a long time for me. So Devon, as we're getting started, who are you? Why are you here?
So, hey everyone, I'm Devon. You may or may not know me. Darren and I we've been friends and we've worked together for, I think it's about 4 years now, right?
Yeah, around 4 years.
Around 4 years.
Oh, man.
I'm the host and creator of Emblemcast, which is primarily a Fire Emblem-based podcast, and Darren has been a cast member since its inception. Darren, I think you were actually the first person.
Was I really?
I think you were the first person I reached out to.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So Darren and I, we've been buddies for 4 years, and I'm here because we both we have a great interest in video games and in media, and I think we were both, as much as we love Fire Emblem and SRPGs and everything, we were really looking for an outlet to talk about video games outside of a single franchise.
Definitely. Definitely. We were so ready for it.
We were so ready for it, and this is going to be a great opportunity for that. And I am so happy that Darren picked Metal Gear Solid 1 for the first game, because as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, I've never played a game in the Metal Gear Solid franchise before, and it has always been on my list. People have always told me it's right up my alley, and this game, we'll get into it. Darren, Metal Gear Solid 1 for PlayStation 1, it's an experience.
Yeah. So, sort of to give this game a bit of build-up, Metal Gear Solid 1 is arguably one of the most important games that released in a really critical year for video games in 1998, which saw the releases of the likes of, Ocarina of Time, Half-Life 2, and of course, Metal Gear Solid. So why is this game so important? First and foremost, this is probably, at the time, the most cinematic game ever. We had credits overlaid off of intro gameplay, cutscenes with multiple camera angles and changing cuts and special effects. We had professional level voice acting. I feel like this is true. I think Metal Gear Solid 1 probably has the best voice acting of any game up until that point. Is that fair to say?
I would agree. I mean, there might be some weird PC game or something that I'm not aware of, but at least from any game that I've ever played, absolutely. And we were talking about this a little bit just, off stream, but I think the voice acting absolutely stands up, and it there are definitely games, in the modern era that come out that I would say don't have as strong a voice acting as this game.
Definitely not. It's pretty wild. And we're going to get into sort of the behind the scenes as we go along about how they did the voice acting, because that was also very different for the time. And I think nowadays the method is pretty common, especially with all the mocapping and the more complex facial and animation capture that we're doing with actual real life people who are in most cases also the voice actors for a lot of these characters. Like Naughty Dog in particular is very well known for the advancements they've made to voice acting, and performance capture would be the proper term for this sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So to cover this, for this replay, back in the day, I played the PS1 original on a PS1 disc on my PS2, getting meta as I go up there. And for this version that we played a modded version of the PC release this game. And we did so for a couple of reasons. Number one is that A, it's easier than hooking up a PS1 in 2020. And B is that this runs better than the PS1 version. It actually runs at 60 frames a second, which, in my mind, huge gameplay improvement for
Absolutely.
the overall feel of the game. It comes with some caveats, like the whole Psycho Mantis Easter egg. We'll get into how the PC version isn't as eloquent with
and the FOVs, which are short, but
they're just
it's worth
like static screens in this release. And this is easily findable and accessible just through a Reddit post where someone put in the hard work to make the PC version mostly work on modern systems.
I want to mention that really quickly because I had some issues getting it to run. It worked and then it didn't work, but actually, literally today, I figured out exactly what was triggering it. And I saw a couple of Reddit threads about this, but I thought I had tried it. I guess I didn't. One way that you can get the game to work, if you get this common error that'll say insert disk, I think since the game is, it's a modified version of the original PC release, the game is looking for an external disk or hard drive or something like that to access. So some people said they got success to work for that error to go away.
Mm-hmm.
If you plug in a flash drive, for me, it worked when I plugged in an external hard drive. But once I did that, the game worked perfectly. So if you guys tried the game at home and you get that error, try a flash drive, try an external hard drive, and hopefully it should be able to fix it. Because as Darren said, I would say, I mean, we'll get into Twin Snakes later, the remake, but this is definitely the best way to play Metal Gear Solid 1.
I'm glad you brought up Twin Snakes because I'm going to mention it now just because this is not going to be the focus. I played probably about half of the game of this recent replay in Twin Snakes. I beat both of us, Devon, literally minutes before going live, finished Metal Gear Solid 1. Congrats to you, Devon. And
Thank you.
I finished it a couple weeks back, and I was starting to go through Twin Snakes and sort of just stopped due to real life and other things coming up. But Twin Snakes is not going to be the focus of this. For those that are unaware, there was a remake of Metal Gear Solid 1. This came out in 2004, developed by Silicon Knights, and there was both Konami and Kojima himself actually oversaw development of this. They brought in originally, it was like a shot-for-shot remake, which... all right, that's what a remake is. And then through development, they brought in, I'm going to butcher this, Ryuhei Kitamura, who's a pretty popular, I wouldn't say he's like the best Japanese movie director or anything like that, but he's directed a lot of notable films in Japan. And he's known for his really over-the-top stylish action. And Kojima is a absolute cinema weeb. Like he loves Hollywood, he loves movies, and he wanted to insert like more Hollywood, I put this in air quotes, Hollywood level action into the game, which resulted in these crazy outlandish cutscenes. This is where you have Snake doing backflips to dodge sniper shots. He's kick flipping off of missiles to land a killing blow. He's twirling around, and it's just backflip and slow motion city.
It's contentious, to say the least.
It's kind of a love it or hate it kind of deal. It really kind of messes with the tone of the game in a lot of spaces. In some, it augments it. In others, it really is at odds. And this remake also included gameplay elements from Metal Gear Solid 2, so first-person aiming. It had tranquilizer gun that you could use, so you could knock out guards with a gun, and it had like the ability to hide bodies, open lockers, hang off ledges, and it had a couple of like updated elements in the boss fights where you could take them out non-lethally now, like in future games. But overall, I think personally it's a bit of a weaker gameplay experience just because of how broken first-person mode is, because even though the mechanics are updated, the actual game itself has stayed the exact same, and so you don't really gain anything from it. Like the Revolver Ocelot fight's a great example. You just shoot him in first person a bunch of times and the fight's over. So like that whole element of doing that weird chase in a square is gone.
Something that the game doesn't tell you, by the way, that you can move and shoot.
Yes, mash that X button while you're shooting. So we're not going to talk about Twin Snakes any further than that. I am going to mention this now as part of the research. I looked into this because the voice acting for Twin Snakes was redone. And I was really curious as to why. Devon, why do you think all the voice acting was redone for Twin Snakes?
I was actually going to ask. I was going to ask if there was voice work redone. I have no idea. Is it part? I know a couple of weeks ago we talked that between David Hayter, Snake's voice actor, Solid Snake's voice actor, and Hideo Kojima, there's been some little bit of contention and drama there. Kojima's been kind of trying to push him out for a while, if you said, I think.
Yeah, he's been trying to replace David Hayter at least since 3.
Did that have anything to do with it, or was it more just because of the quality of the voices that they wanted
to give a bit of background, this is like one of the coolest things that I found out about Metal Gear Solid 1 in preparing for this episode. So Metal Gear Solid 1 was entirely recorded in a mansion in Hollywood. Not a voice studio, not a like soundproofed room, but like an open floor in a mansion with all the voice actors, the vocal director, the casting director, and a bunch of officials from Konami all there in like one room watching everyone's performance. And because of this method, they had a lot of background noise captured. So either if this was people in the background or particularly like motorcycles or cars and ongoing traffic coming by, that all got picked up to the mics. So when they uncompressed the audio from Metal Gear Solid 1, the original, and brought it into Twin Snakes, they're like, oh my god, like we can hear all the like this traffic noise. Like this is unacceptable. And part of what you were just saying before, they were originally going to recast like everyone but Solid Snake. And David Hayter, I really tried hard to find an official source to back it up. It's basically just off of what he's mentioned personally and what other offhand comments of other members of the cast. So I haven't been able to find any other source that's like, this is exactly what happened. But David Hayter reportedly cut his pay in half to bring back everyone from the original cast to reprise their roles.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
I see Fignitis respond there. Yeah, they recorded Metal Gear Solid and Resident Evil. That's why it's got the premium level of voice acting. And it's kind of notable because in Twin Snakes, some of the performances I would argue are better. Like, I think surprisingly to me, David Hayter's Snake is improved in Twin Snakes, but I find that a lot of the cast kind of lack the charm and grit. That there's like a pseudo grittiness, probably due to the compression, but there's something about hearing the new audio that feels flat to me. I don't know if it's just because it's really clean, or if some of the actors just they weren't in the same space as they were for the original game, or maybe it's just nostalgia. But in my ear, it doesn't sound as good.
It's Snake. I'm in front of the disposal facility.
Excellent, Snake. Age hasn't slowed you down one bit.
How's that sneaking suit working out?
I'm nice and dry, but it's a little hard to move.
Bear with it. It's designed to prevent hypothermia. This is Alaska, you know.
Take it easy, I'm grateful. If it weren't for your suit and your shot, I would have turned into a popsicle out there.
An anti-freezing peptide, Snake. All of the genome soldiers in this exercise are using it.
I see. I'm relieved to hear that. Already tested, huh? By the way, how's the diversionary operation going?
2 F-16s just took off from Galena and are headed your way. The terrorist radar should have already picked them up.
It's Snake. I'm in front of the disposal facility.
Excellent, Snake. Age hasn't slowed you down one bit.
How's that sneaking suit working out?
I'm nice and dry, but it's a little hard to move.
Bear with it. It's designed to prevent hypothermia. This is Alaska, you know.
Take it easy. I'm grateful. If it weren't for your suit and your shot, I would have turned into a popsicle out there.
An anti-freezing peptide, Snake. All of the genome soldiers in this exercise are using it.
I see. I'm relieved to hear that. Already tested, huh? By the way, how's the diversionary operation going?
2 F-16s just took off from Galena and are headed your way. The terrorist radar should have already picked them up.
I guess I'll get into this now. So basically, for this recording that they did for the original game, they did this process where they're all in the same room together, right? And this has been backed up. This is all legit. There's a Game Informer podcast on this with the vocal, and I believe she's the voice director and the casting director for pretty much the entire Metal Gear Solid series. Her name is Chris Zimmerman Salter, and at one point she was married to Ocelot's voice actor. Fun fact. And essentially, she got to choose the entire cast herself of just the people she knew and who would be appropriate. And they brought everyone into this house. I don't know. It's not clear why they were here. I think it's just this is the way that it worked out. They were just able to, through circumstances of like, this is the space they had rented, this is the space that they had and the time they had. So they had a pretty tight window to record this. And they ended up using every actor recorded their lines in pairs. So for a lot of the codec conversations, say it was Colonel and Snake, the two voice actors would be sitting across from each other and recording their lines. And at the time, this was not really a common practice in the video games industry. It was only really used for like probably animation films, like Disney level films and whatnot. It wasn't really that common. And these days, like that's almost a standard for a lot of voice work. It's that you have like two booths and you have the actors go back and forth, and it gives them, they found it really helped improve their performances. And so they would be like, okay, Liquid and Snake, get in there, like go record. And then everyone else got to watch their performances, which they felt helped them better understand the story and get into it.
I mean, that being said, as well, the fact that they have actual voice actors is kind of a cut above other games of this era, because you hear stories of, that nothing specific comes to my mind right now, but of other games from, around the era of 1999, where sometimes the voice work was literally just staff members or essentially people they found on, what would be Craigslist today. That makes any sense.
I mean, like when you compare like the casting process for like, say, Resident Evil or PS1.
Exactly.
They literally like, hey, you're the first white people in Japan that came to this audition. You got it. Mm-hmm. That's
how you end up with Gibble Sandwich.
Yeah. It's crazy. All right, Devon. So that's a lot of like our research and background. Yeah. So now we're going to get into Metal Gear Solid. The story of this game, if you don't know, this is from the manual, which is amazing. A Craigslist cast and an Airbnb. Yeah. All right.
By the way, the manual / CD jewel case is semi-critical.
It's beyond semi-critical. If you don't have that or access to Google Image, you're gonna be hooped. And I just saw my light accidentally move just a bit. Okay, I fixed that. Production error there. All right, so it's the dawn of the new millennium, the 21st century. The nuclear weapons disposal facility on Shadow Moses Island in Alaska's Fox Archipelago. It's in Fox Archipelago. It's attacked and captured by next-generation special forces led by members of FOX-HOUND. The terrorists have secured hundreds of nuclear warheads, and they're demanding the government turn over the remains of Big Boss. They warn that if their demands are not met within 24 hours, they'll launch a nuclear weapon. Solid Snake, after 6 years from Zanzibar land in Metal Gear 2, is once again called back to duty in a top-secret mission to deal with the greatest terrorist threat the world has ever seen. First, he must single-handedly infiltrate the nuclear weapons disposal site and rescue 2 hostages. DARPA Chief Donald Anderson and President of ArmsTech Kenneth Baker. And then, eliminate the terrorist threat and prevent a nuclear launch. The clock is ticking. Once again, Snake heads into battle alone. So that's the basic plot summary directly from the manual. I frickin' love it.
That's incredible. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, I've never read it before because my original playthrough of this game was through the Metal Gear Solid Essentials collection, which released as like a PS2 compilation with the PS1 disc, and it had no manual, it just had the discs. 2 discs.
I was going to ask that. This is semi-tangential, but have you played the VR missions before?
I downloaded it on PSN, and the PC version actually bundles in VR missions, which was the case in Japan, because in Japan there were 2 versions of Metal Gear Solid. There was the original, and then there was Metal Gear Solid Integral, which is what the American version is based off of. And in this version, they included stuff like an easy mode there, which gives you, I believe, a suppressed submachine gun, which makes the game much easier. And they also include stuff like a photo mode with the 3D models of Naomi Hunter and Mei Ling, because Kojima. And and there's also all sorts of stuff. And they included VR missions, which we're not going to be really covering, but VR missions is kind of weirdly better from a gameplay standpoint because there's so much variety. And the stealth in Metal, like we're going to get into this really shortly, but the stealth of Metal Gear Solid is so arcadey that short, bite-sized missions really lend itself to that.
Right.
And you have crazy fights like solving a murder mystery, fighting a Godzilla-sized guard, getting to play as Gray Fox, and shooting the targets, and just stuff like that. So VR missions is neat. It's a cool, odd thing that exists, and it's actually low-key really fun if you get into it and you enjoy the core mechanics of the game and you want more of it. So Devon.
Yes.
This is your first time through Metal Gear Solid 1.
Yes, it is.
How did you find it initially when you started in that one room with the 3 guards infiltrating Shadow Moses and there's credits going on and you have no idea what you're doing?
Well, you watched me play it.
That's true.
I am not the greatest Metal Gear Solid 1 player in the world. I think that's a fair statement, perhaps.
Yeah, you won't be going for any speed runs after this?
Not yet. It's kind of incredible how the game just drops you into the scenario like that. And I remember when we first started playing, because I streamed a little bit of my playthrough with you, you're like, Devon, you need to go into the menu and what is the
you need to watch the mission briefing so you know what's going on.
Yeah. Which is very strange that they would not just put that as a skippable cutscene in the the intro when you start the game. But as we said before, Kojima's trying to make this as cinematic as an experience as possible, and it is pretty fucking awesome when you just see the the credits going over.
You got the Gaelic opera starting when you load up to the game and Snake's swimming.
It's still cool. It's still awesome. I think part of the reason it's cool is because it's like, holy shit, this is a PS1 game doing things that PS3 games couldn't even pull off properly. But
yeah, in some cases.
Yeah.
All right.
So but I think I don't know. We are going to get into this, but the stealth, as you said, it is very arcadey. And another one of the first things you told me is, Devon, like, try not to kill people as much as possible. Try and play this as a stealth game as much as possible. To sum up my thoughts on Metal Gear very quickly, because I think it'll ring true with the discussion that I bring to the table. Metal Gear Solid, not Metal Gear for MSX.
Yeah, not to be confused.
Metal Gear Solid. No, not to be confused. Metal Gear Solid is a stellar video game experience, and it's something that I think people who have interest in the medium and just the history of the medium should absolutely play in 2020. Metal Gear Solid as purely a video game absolutely shows its age.
Yeah, definitely.
And it shows its age to the point where, I think we will both contest this point, but some people, like with the whole Final Fantasy VII remake coming out, I've heard a lot of discourse over the internet about people saying they don't like, they don't like turn-based combat and things like that. So it made sense for Square to switch to active time combat. Where I think this game, in many respects, has aged a hell of a lot better than Final Fantasy VII. I would argue things like the gameplay of Final Fantasy VII are just a little bit more robust and stand the test of time a little bit better because you don't have things like control issues. Really,
it's harder to have control issues for a turn-based menu-based RPG versus a stealth game, an action game that you're controlling the whole time,
And the controls do end up being a little bit of an issue for me at some points. It's manageable and it's totally navigatable, if that's a word, but it does get a little bit frustrating.
Well,
thankfully the save system is good in this game.
The save system's awesome, and you get sage advice from your radio support Mei Ling, who if you save through the save menu, she'll give you all sorts of like Chinese proverbs and like little anecdotes on all sorts of like life lessons, and it's like, oh, like I feel so educated playing this game. And I have you ever heard about the art of war? Just stuff like that. And you're like, oh my god. And they cranked that up to like 11 in later games.
The codec is incredible. It's pretty amazing how two almost SNES looking, JPEG sprites.
Yeah, it's just artwork talking to each other.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
But to your point about the stealth gameplay, the points I found the most difficult are one, the aiming, which is like the gunplay is very similar to like tank controls of like Resident Evil, where you hold the button, you get into position, and then you release the button to shoot.
Yeah.
And it can be
sort of a lock-on system.
Yeah,
but
it
doesn't always work.
If you like tap it really quickly, it'll fix onto your nearest target.
Yeah.
So for the pistol, I found it worked pretty well, where you're able to quickly snap to different targets and take them out. But with the assault rifle, I found I'm just sitting there spinning in circles, just spraying it. Like it's very difficult to control.
We'll get onto this when we get into sort of the progression of the game itself. But the pistol I found is, I mean, the assault rifle is useful in those, elevator battles and sort of enemy spawn situations.
Yeah.
But the pistol as an actual gameplay device is infinitely more useful, just because pretty early on you get the silencer, which makes taking out guards pretty easy to do.
Yeah, it actually, in some ways, it kind of breaks the game for some, because there's a couple of rooms where you can't really use the pistol, but when you can just quickly go like tap tap tap. It's like 3 shots to kill a guard, and then their body disappears, which kind of contributes to the arcadey nature.
And also, if you kill them when you're out of the alert phase, you get rations or ammo and things like that sometimes.
Yeah.
So there are other benefits.
There's a lot of benefits to killing people in this game, which
besides rank,
which they contribute that, and they go into that as part of the story, and that's part of like the sort of the methodology of like, you should feel bad for playing a video game type of thing, which is,
I mean, Snake is a changed man throughout this game, apparently.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he actually has some moments of character development and insight, which I buy, I would say, and others that
the romance I buy less, but
we'll definitely be talking about the romance.
Oh yeah,
I think this is sort of I'm stealing this directly from like Matthew Matosa's Metal Gear Solid 1 analysis, but I think he counted that there are a grand total, if you don't count respawning enemies and enemies that appear during the action sequences. So there's a couple set pieces in like the mid to the later portion of the game, like where you have to run from groups of guards chasing you, or when you meet up with Meryl after meeting the DARPA chief, and you have to fight those guards. So there's a couple like set piece moments where you can't avoid combat, but if you take those out of the equation, I think there's only like 24 guards on all of Shadow Moses Island. So the actual amount of sneaking is in this game is actually really small, and it's almost all in the front half of the game.
Yes, it is. And that's something I find interesting, because at the very, very back end of the game, when there is another thing that we will absolutely discuss, which is the key card or PAL card quest, where when you go back to the like ice room, the freezer where you fight Vulcan Raven for the second time, they all of a sudden introduce, the original gameplay mechanic of stealth with a couple of guards, and I was like, holy shit, we're back.
Oh my God, we're back here again.
For this one room, but we're back. Should
You're
we
gonna know.
say, by the way, or would you rather wait later on that we, spoilers for Metal Gear Solid 1 from here on out?
Yes, I think it should go without saying that for all of these episodes of the Gaming Pilgrimage going forward, for any game we're discussing, we are going to get right into spoilers. So if you've never played it before, I would encourage you to stop, to leave, to go play the game yourself, because that is, in most cases, the absolute best way to experience this type of story. And go through it that way. And yes, Steven from CatMax
You're
Gaming,
alive.
I'm alive. Was I ever dead? Am I undead? Re-dead?
Re-dead. There you go. There's the Ocarina of Time.
Yeah. There we go.
And,
But
I'll reiterate this very quickly, and Darren, I think
spoiler
you'll
alert.
agree. Well, spoiler, but also spoiler alert from here on out. But play this game. It's like we said, if you can get past the sort of bug hitches that I had, absolutely play Metal Gear Solid 1. There's a reason it's talked about as much as people talk about it. There are frustrating moments, but it is a pretty short game, so they're easy to surpass, and I think you'll enjoy yourself.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into the sort of structure we're going to follow for our main discourse of this. So we're going to go by boss fights, because in my mind, for Metal Gear Solid 1, this game is all about like the crazy encounters, and for the most part, all of those are in the boss fights, because boss fights are tied to cutscenes, they're tied to like different gameplay mechanics, and they're like the most cinematic and important parts of the game. So I think it makes sense to go by this boss by boss.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And if there's significant gameplay in between, we will talk about that. So first of all, we have the initial infiltration where you go through that initial elevator. You go up, you see the Hind Dean, you're like, they got pineapples and 5-6ers, all that stuff. And then you sneak to B1, you meet the DARPA chief, you get told by the colonel several times how to descend a ladder by pressing the circle button. Snake,
After you
press
already
the circle
have,
button.
I think, right? I think you've used the ladder at that point.
Yes. Because you have to use it in the vent to get to the first floor of that base, and then you have to do it again to get up into the vent on that the B1.
That's when the colonel decides to tell you how to use the ladder.
Snake, there's the circle
Press
button.
the action button.
Yeah, and it's so goofy. I love it when they do that. So after that, you get told to find the Arms Tech President, Kenneth Baker. He is in the B2 basement. You need to use C4 in a neat little puzzle that initially stumped me on my first playthrough of the game, because there's no other puzzle quite like this in the game, where you actually have to look and listen to the environment to figure out where to go. Sorry, were you about to say something, Devon?
Oh no, I said it's very Zelda. It reminds me of, in particular, I think only the 2D Zelda games actually, where if you hold your sword out and kind of tap them against the wall, you can see what walls are bombable to release. Or to open up a new.
Hearing you say that, I just had this amazing idea of when we're talking about this in the YouTube edit of this discussion, of having Snake, planting the C4 and blowing it up, and after it blows up, it just plays like the Zelda jingle. Because you're totally right. That is such a Zelda puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you go into there, you meet the legend, the memeiest character in all of Metal Gear Solid.
The true protagonist.
In a weird way, you could say that. You can make an argument. Arguably the most important character in the entire Metal Gear Solid series. FOX-HOUND, gun specialist, or he's like, what is he, like a skilled gunfighter and torture specialist? Revolver. Yeah. Think of it like the Twin Snakes version, where he just twirls the revolver for 20 seconds. Ocelot.
Special Operations FOX-HOUND. Revolver Ocelot.
Special Operations FOX-HOUND. Revolver.
Ocelot.
So, Devon, you love this character.
I love this character.
Do you love this boss fight?
No, no. And I will say I love very few boss fights in this game. Story-wise, they're wonderful, but this fight it's weird. So there's a mechanic in this game, as we mentioned earlier. You hit the fire button, on PC, or square is what it's normally mapped to, to use your weapon. But if you also hold down the crawl button, or X, you can move while not shooting, but sort of having your gun aimed out, which is what this boss fight absolutely intends you to do. And you sort of have to just chase him in a circle. Once again, I didn't even intend to do this, but it reminds me of the Zelda boss and God, Link to the Past, Link to Awakening. It's in a bunch of 2D Zelda games. Darren, do you know what I'm talking about? Where you're supposed to use the Pegasus boots to run in a square to hit the back end of it.
Right.
And Ocarina too, actually.
Yeah,
it's in tons of Zelda games. So that's kind of what this boss fight is testing you, just moving and shooting, which is actually not a skill that you will really use.
It's not
the rest of the game
as critical as you would think.
No,
at least in VR missions, it's much more important for getting
the main game. No, though.
Yeah, in the main game, it's relatively simple. But Ocelot is like a change of pace from everything else, because this guy takes a bunch of bullets to kill.
He's a health bar.
Yeah,
so it's a true boss. Yeah.
I adore the whole all the quotes he has. I think that's the one thing Metal Gear Solid gives us in spades, is so many quotable lines. And
it's kind of incredible too, because you see a ton of games from this era, which Metal Gear does, just like these other games, where I know some of the Mega Man X games are particularly notorious of this, where when you're fighting boss fights, you'll get repeating boss lines. But there's something about Metal Gear Solid that just makes it more charming, even when you hear it for 5 times.
Yeah.
in one boss.
And I see Fignet's comment, breaking all the pods makes the stealth sections much harder. That totally makes sense. Just, what was that noise? Oh, just must be my imagination. Must be a rat. But every video game I've ever gotten a revolver in, I always am 6 bullets. More than enough to kill anything that moves. And just Ocelot just being this freaking fanboy for the Colt Single Action Army is just the
awesome,
weirdest thing to me.
Underused in this game, which it's great that they bring him back. And story-wise, they kind of are just everyone dies. Oh yeah, except Liquid and Ocelot.
Yeah, it's
Ocelot as well. I don't know. You'll find out next game.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
So in the Twin Snakes, I'm going to mention this during a couple of these fights about how the Twin Snakes kind of changes the fight. So I mentioned earlier this fight is ruined in Twin Snakes because you can just first person aim and just repeatedly shoot him in the face, and then it's over in 10 seconds. That's true of a lot of fights in Twin Snakes, but there's also a mechanic that they took from 2 where you can shoot the pipes in this area and steam shoots out and he'll be and you'll get exposed and you can shoot him.
Really? That's cool.
A neat, super not needed mechanic, but it's great that it's there, and Metal Gear Solid's full of those.
I was just going to say, Darren, Metal Gear Solid is the king of not needed mechanics, and it's that's neat, that's cool.
Yeah. And so after this fight, you meet Kenneth Baker, who Snake gets really upset that he forgot what Meryl's codec number is.
Uh-huh.
And he tells you, look at the back of the CD case, which was an anti-piracy measure. So you had to own the game. And Metal Gear 2 actually did this trick beforehand.
Really?
And they only later did it for this game. This game actually does a lot of things Metal Gear 2 did, but we didn't know that because it never came out in the West at the time. So we didn't really have a way to know that. So
by the way, calling Meryl is literally required because there's a door that she opens for you. And it will not be open unless you look at the back of the box or, Google.
Yeah, which
to find her code.
It's hilarious. And in the Twin Snakes, I bring this up because this is one of the most ridiculous things in the Twin Snakes. During this cutscene where Kenneth Baker is I forgot. And then, Snake's what? He's mad, but that's kind of it. It's just going
Yeah.
In Twin Snakes, he has a hissy fit and pulls his gun on him.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Wow.
He like has like the spasm, and then he just whips out his SOCOM, and he's like pointing at the guy, and you're like, holy shit, Snake, like calm down.
Snake, dude.
But yeah, so after that, you need to use your cigarettes to get through the infrared lasers, which, how did you find that?
I had the thermal visor.
Oh, so
That's how
you bypassed what initially stumped me on my first playthrough of this game back in like 2009.
I did not know that you could use the cigarettes, but that makes sense. This is something that I kind of struggled with, but I got better as the game goes on, and hopefully I'll get better at with the rest of the series. There are things in this game that sort of, people talk about video game logic. Metal Gear Solid does not always abide by video game logic. It abides by Kojima logic.
So
if that makes any sense.
This game, almost all the puzzles can be solved by calling someone on the codec, and they'll tell you what to do. Like in 99% of cases, it's call Colonel.
Sometimes several times, though. You need to call him 3 or 4 times to actually get an answer out of him.
Yes, that is very true. And in this case, I think it's Nastasha Romanakov. What is her name? She is probably like the least fleshed out radio cast member. And she's like a nuclear arms specialist. Like, she knows everything about nuclear disarmament. And she has a couple interesting lines with Snake. I tried to, in this playthrough, do more of the codec conversations, but she doesn't really have that many in comparison to the rest of the cast, and that's probably why you never hear from her. But she's the one that tells you, I think Colonel tells you to call her about how to get through this, and she's like, if you have like anything that emits smoke, you'll see the lasers. And, there's a whole cutscene dedicated to Snake bragging about how he smuggled in his cigarettes by hiding them in his stomach.
They damage you.
And they literally kill you if you use them. So it is hugely disadvantageous to use them. And if you actually do use the cigarettes to get through this puzzle, it makes it really intense. Because if you go in first person mode, you can see the laser going up and down. And in the top down view, it's kind of like a stranger view of it. And if you do it in first person, just slowly go through it, very tense. But then we get called by Deep Throat, poorly named, who warns us about a tank and mines. And we meet, which, to my surprise, in Devon and I's conversations, Devon adores Falcon Raven. And I'm like,
he's so good.
I didn't expect that.
This is Raven's territory. Snakes don't belong in Alaska.
So why don't you tell us about the tank boss fight and by proxy
Metal
Vulcan
Gear
Raven?
Ham to the best. There's really not that much to say about the tank boss fight, I feel like.
In the original version, it's like what? Just toss grenades and run?
It's literally toss grenades, and they sort of auto-target into like the cockpit. And you damage Vulcan Raven a little bit, and then he like goes down, and then there's a random genome soldier that pops up, and then Snake escapes, and he has a conversation, I think, with Liquid.
Yes, he calls Liquid, and he's like, he's pretty good. And apparently, it's revealed, if you pay attention to this cutscene, that soldier that flies out of the tank when the tank itself doesn't completely blow up, but there's an explosion, and that soldier flies out, lands in front of Snake, and drops the next key card Snake needs. And apparently they planted that. They wanted Snake to proceed.
Right.
Why they chose this
we'll get into
method? Questionable. But this is what they chose.
It worked.
Shit.
One thing I love about Vulcan is, out of all of the members of FOX-HOUNDs, I mean, I'm sure most people listening to the podcast know this, but all of the members, Darren and I joked, they sound like Mega Man X bosses, like Mavericks.
Vulcan Raven, out of all of them, sounds the most Mega Man X.
But Darren, he's the only one that seems to have like command over his animal. He's just got a bunch of fucking ravens flying around. He's got him tattooed on him. The raven on his head thirsts for blood. I know that.
It thirsts for Snake's blood, and snakes don't belong in Alaska.
Yeah. They don't belong in Alaska. I don't know. I can't even put my finger on it, but there's something so wonderfully hammy about Vulcan
Yeah,
Raven,
I mean,
and it is a shame that most of these characters die by the end of this game.
yeah, because you kill them. But
Yes, you do.
he is like a spiritual shaman. That is part of his deal, and I believe he's actually from Alaska.
Yeah.
So that's a whole thing. And there's not really much this whole fight and this encounter, but it does give you some more hammy lines. And in Twin Snakes, you can just knock out the guards, and then in the cutscene, he still just flies out of it anyway, and it's silly. The fight's a little different. You can like hide in a grate, and this is probably the fight the most change between versions.
This is a quick fight in the original.
And you can also use chaff grenades to disorient it, and so it doesn't just track onto you and just fire its main gun at you and kill you.
Yes, the raven on my head.
It thirsts for his blood.
So we have Building 2, which is where they store all the nuclear warheads. You can't fire your gun here because Naomi says no, and nanomachines.
But the guards can, and they kill themselves and you.
Yes. Which makes this one of the more, for your first time through, probably one of the more frustrating areas, because you lose a lot of tools and you have to rely on which we haven't talked about yet, the Soliton radar system to the exact cone of vision of all the guards.
What you're looking at most of the game.
Yeah. Which it's easy to not even look at the actual ground around you and just look at that. Very
Absolutely.
easy. From there, we have the classic Nikita puzzle, where you need to fire the Nikita rocket launcher through the gun cameras. Which, shut up, they're a thing. And this is a puzzle stolen from Metal Gear 2 as well.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
This whole Nikita thing it's the same thing. It's an electric, gas-filled room that you have to go through. Then you go to the horror hallway, where there's just a bunch of chopped up dead dudes that you see get totally killed by the cyborg ninja, which we forgot to mention cuts off Revolver Ocelot's hand.
Oh, right.
Also, in Twin Snakes, they correct the line to be when his entire arm's cut off to be my arm. But there's something about my hand that sounds so much better to me.
You're pretty good. Just what I'd expect from the man with the same code as the boss. It's been a long time since I had such a good fight, but I'm just getting warmed up. What? My hand!
You're pretty good. Just what I'd expect from the man with the same code as the boss. It's been a long time since I had such a good fight, but I'm just getting warmed up. What? My hand!
And yeah, so here you meet Otacon, who, classic Otacon, pees his pants. He talks about how this badass soldier fighting a cyborg ninja is just like one of his Japanese anime.
Just like it.
And you have a very manly fight where you can throw chaff grenades and punch Gray Fox repeatedly to win. What did you think of this fight?
You know, I haven't mentioned this on the podcast yet, but I played a little bit of Metal Gear Solid 1 a couple of years ago. I downloaded it on my PS3, but I played it on my Vita, which I would say is not the best way to play this game, just because Metal Gear Solid is one of the few PS1 games, at least I play it, that takes advantage of both triggers, just because you're using them to equip different items and things. And this is where I got stuck originally. I don't exactly remember why. I think it's because I did not realize that you could use the chaff grenades to stun him, which makes the fight a hell of a lot easier. Chaff grenades, from this point on, become your best friend. I mean, they are used constantly,
I was gonna
either
say, I
with
think you
the
can
gun
use them in
cameras.
almost every single fight.
Yeah, they are invaluable, and thankfully the game gives you enough of them to where you're never really out of them. But it kind of becomes a point where it's like you keep getting hit, just try Chaff Grenade and see what happens, and more than likely it'll help you. But
100%.
I think narratively this fight is really cool. Like a lot of the fights in this game, I think this goes on slightly too long. The boss takes a little bit too much, and
I can agree with that.
there's a point when you have to turn the thermal visor on to see him at the very end, and you get him down to basically 0 health. And I almost died when I got him there because Gray Fox, spoilers, Cyborg explodes right next to you, and the game doesn't warn you, and you have to shoot him after that. So that was almost a reset for me. But all the cutscenes following are very cool. I think Gray Fox is pretty awesome character, but I think one that I would assume you would have more attachment to if you played Metal Gear 2. Just because these two fought each other in Metal Gear 2, and
Well, in
Snake
Metal Gear
thought he
2,
killed him.
Gray Fox is like, for most of the game, is the main villain. And there's this whole plot twist, which they, again, steal from Metal Gear 2, where he calls you under a fake alias to warn you about various traps. And he responds by saying, with Snake's like, "Who is this?" He's like, "I'm your #1 fan." And he says that in this game too. So that entire dynamic is directly taken from that game and put here, which is kind of weird, but I guess it makes sense because for a Western audience, we didn't know. We didn't have any way to know.
Yeah.
And yeah, I ultimately like the fight. I like how you can fight him with guns, and it's way harder.
You can? I didn't know that. How does that work?
He uses the sword, and he'll kick your ass. Is what will happen. Yeah. But you can also, as soon as you unequip your guns, he's like, "Yes, let's fight with our fists as true warriors do.
Yeah.
Only a fool trusts his life to a weapon."
Hand-to-hand combat is the basis of all combat, or something like that.
Yeah, that's what they say. It's amazing. And then it's like, the whole thing of "hurt me more, Snake," and just make me feel alive. And you have your fight.
that's a pretty interesting choice. I have not, this is something that's semi-common in games these days, but this is skipping way ahead, but the Metal Gear Rex fight, when Gray Fox comes in and you have the stinger pointed at him, and he's asking you to kill him, and you're pointing at him, you're targeted onto him, but there's literally no option to shoot at him.
Snake repeatedly says, "I can't do it," or "No,"
and
stuff like that. Yeah, because the thing is that I think if you played Metal Gear 2, obviously you'd have stronger attachment and you'd have the narrative backing, but like
it kind of comes later with Naomi.
Gray Fox does, or it's not, Snake says it in a conversation with Naomi that like Gray Fox is probably the person like he's respected the most and views him as like his closest friend, even though they were adversaries for a time. And so this fight is sentimental and it's neat. It's a little gimmicky. It goes on for a little too long, and you meet Otacon, who is Snake's best bro for life. He designed Metal Gear Rex because he likes anime.
Right.
And something about his family being cursed and creating weapons of mass destruction, which is a whole thing.
His limp just goes away, by the way.
Yeah.
Because there's a whole plot where Snake's saying, like, "You'll just slow me down," because he has the limp, but he's saying, not when I have this cloaking device. But
stealth camo.
Right after that cutscene, he just leaves and he's fine.
And then he helps you out throughout the rest of the game.
He does. Injury, the same thing with Meryl. Injury is, at least with other characters, is not too big of a setback.
Maybe they had some rations.
True. Maybe they had some rations.
So then next you have another weird puzzle where you need to pay attention to soldiers' butts.
Right. Oh God, yeah. Because Meryl is a cute butt.
Meryl has a cute behind, as Otacon says. Yeah. And this is something they draw attention to when you first meet Meryl meeting the DARPA chief, and then the camera like zooms into her butt, and Snake's like, "Whoa!"
Lara Croft, eat your heart out.
Yeah. And so I guess let's talk about the Meryl and Snake relationship now, because this is kind of where it comes to a head. This is right before the Psycho Mantis fight, which is probably the most talked about gameplay segment from this whole game for probably mostly good reason.
I think so.
But yeah, let's talk about Meryl and Snake, because this is where they really start to build up their relationship. At first, it's this whole thing of Snake's like, the man fails to live up to the legend, and I'll knock you right off your feet type of thing.
But at the same time, there are some interesting lines early on here where Meryl comes around to Snake so quickly, which we've talked about. But I mean, obviously, they basically fall in love. And what we were saying 24 hours. I think it's got to be more like 12 hours, right?
Yeah.
Because it's night when the game starts and it's morning, dusk, whatever you want to call it when the game ends. So it's about 12 hours.
Yeah.
But there are some lines. Yes, there are some lines where Meryl talks about being a soldier just because of her father and things, and how she's, never looked towards love and doesn't really feel attraction towards men. That changes quick.
That changes within minutes.
Yes, it
after
does.
This cutscene. And important to note, in Twin Snakes, when you meet Meryl in the bathroom, she's in her underwear.
Wow.
Because Kojima.
Lovely. Kojima loves bots, dudes. He loves them.
He also loves boobs. If you played Metal Gear Solid 5, you would know that and 3.
So I've heard.
Loves boobs. He appreciates both plot and story.
Even Sniper Wolf gets some kind of sexualized scenes with her. I mean,
Sniper Wolf
you have
is
that,
incredibly sexual and innuendo rich character.
I mean, once you fight her for the first time, you're like, oh, Snake, she can't get you out of your mind. She's all you think about. Almost every woman, because Mei Ling seems to have a thing for you. Naomi, there's one sort of last thing that she wants to tell you, which, I mean, it's not said, but it's clearly insinuating, because, again, this is skipping ahead, but Snake asks Naomi if she hates him, and she says, I don't really hate you, but there's something I want to tell you. And it's sort of implied she wants to say, I have feelings for you, but...
And at the beginning of the game, when you have your initial codec calls with Mei Ling and Naomi, Snake's hitting on them. And they're totally going for it.
They're down for it, yeah.
Although in Naomi's case, it might be part of a play, whereas with Mei Ling, it's probably just that's cool. I'm a MIT graduate, and this legendary mercenary is just hitting on me. That's cool.
I'll say Snake is particularly smooth for someone who has, in his words, lived on the battlefield his whole life.
He's not really a people person. And
no, he's not.
Which is funny. So, Psycho Mantis, he takes control of Meryl, in which, to save her, you have to punch her until she's knocked out.
Really? Is that how you did it?
Yeah.
I use a stun grenade.
You can also use a stun grenade.
Yeah.
You just have to incapacitate her so that Psycho Mantis, who is the resident master of telekinesis and FOX-HOUND psychic, because every military unit needs a psychic.
He can fly. It's very Luigi's Mansion, because the way he attacks you is just like throwing pots at you.
It's super Poltergeist. So this fight is infamous because he does the whole thing where he reads the memory card. In the PS1 version, he's
what Konami games
he talks about Konami games. He'll comment about the classic line of "So you like to play Castlevania" and stuff like that, because Symphony of the Night and whatnot. And
speaking of Castlevania, Symphony of the Night might not be a bad game to play on the show sometime.
Yeah, it's a good game.
Yeah, it's a good one.
And he'll comment how often you save and how many people you've killed.
Now let me read your mind. No, perhaps I should say your past. You are a very methodical man, the type that always kicks his tires before he leaves. You are a highly skilled warrior, well suited to this stealth mission. You are extremely careful of traps. You are either very cautious, or you are a coward. Still don't believe me? Now I'll read more deeply into your soul. Your memory is completely clean. You have not saved often. You are somewhat reckless. I can read you like an open book. You still don't believe me? I will show you my psychokinetic power. Put your controller on the floor. Put it down as flat as you can. That's good. Now I will move your controller by the power of my will alone. What do you think now? Can you feel my power now? The demonstration is over.
But Darren, you can't hit him. How do you hit him?
Yeah, he can read your every thought. And so if you call Colonel like 3 times during this fight, Colonel's trying to figure it out. He's like, I don't know how he's doing the snake. And then this whole fight destroys the fourth wall.
Yeah.
And he's like, Snake, you need to plug in the controller to port 2. And Snake's like, what? And it's like this whole thing. So
and on the PC version, we should say that because
you don't do that.
There's no port 2. No, you have to use, if you're using a controller, you have to use the keyboard. I can't imagine like what would it be if you're using the keyboard control?
What do you mean?
I guess you'd still just use the keyboard, right? Because this game, I don't even know if it's really worth mentioning. If you're playing the PC version, like Darren and I did, use the controller because the PC controls are they're pretty.
The
clunky
mouse and keyboard controls do not work.
No, they don't particularly work in a game that's already a little bit clunky to control.
Yeah.
So this game remedies the controller port 2 option by telling you to switch from your controller to the keyboard just fine. Which actually adds a little bit of challenge.
It does. I gotta say, this fight aged a lot worse than I remember it.
Oh yeah.
The whole actual gimmick of the fight of him throwing different objects in the room at you. He throws like balls of psychokinetic energy at you and paintings and
chairs and stuff.
Little tornadoes of stuff. It's really not that fun of a fight, and it's just you shooting into like the FAMAS.
It's particularly annoying when I think halfway through he sort of revives Meryl, and you have to. She's about to shoot herself. And
gotta go hit Meryl again before
hit her.
She shoots herself.
Twice, I think.
Yeah,
because you do it once, then she gets up, then you do it again, and then he goes, "No, you figured it out.
You figured it out. If you punch her, it'll work."
Yeah,
it's a
Meryl takes a fucking beating in this game, Darren.
Also, I forgot to mention this, but Meryl is actually a character from Police Knots.
What is Police Knots?
Police Knots is a visual novel style game Kojima made for the PS1 right before Metal Gear Solid. And in Ocelot, or not Ocelots, in Otacon's lab, they have Police Knot posters on the wall. Which is... Kojima has tons of Easter eggs in his games within each other. Like Snatcher has a helper robot called Metal Gear that helps you throughout the game. And just stuff like that. And Meryl is a character in Police Knots who's not really a critical character. She's a side character, and she has like the whole FOX-HOUND tattoo on her arm, and she's got like the same... She's like a tomboy, and she has like the best... I think she's like a gun range score you have to beat in the game. And she's a bit more tough in that game than she is here.
Well, they really try to make her look tough, but by the end, she's literally jumping into your arms as you carry her away.
Yeah. I mean,
so it doesn't quite work out.
I like Meryl, but I don't love Meryl. I think Meryl has a really rushed character arc because right after this fight, she gets taken out by Sniper Wolf.
Yes.
And very tragic.
Well, there's also a moment in the Psycho Mantis fight where I think it's at the very end where Mantis reveals to Snake that she has, quote, a large place in her heart devoted to you, and it's like these characters have spent probably less than an hour together.
Probably like 20 minutes.
Probably like 20 minutes. Like, what happened? How did she go from only being interested in doing her mission and things, a FOX-HOUND fangirl, to just being like infatuated with Snake?
That's the legend of Solid Snake at work.
Yeah, he's a womanizer.
Yeah, he's got a thing. And the one thing I want to touch on this fight is two things.
The one thing is two things.
Two things. So in Twin Snakes, he talks about Mario Sunshine and Smash Brothers. If you've played those games on your memory card, and
really,
yeah, he'll be like, "So you like to play Mario Sunshine?" And it's just like, "Whoa!"
I do.
And he also comments on Snake's trauma and about how that has affected him, and that's like a really comparatively, because up to this point in the game, Snake is like the super tough commando action hero of the game.
Yes.
And this is the first time you kind of see that he has a weakness. He has a soft spot. He does it. It's a game over if Meryl dies. He's emotionally affected if she dies. He freaks out and screams for her name. Sorry, I think that's comment about Animal Crossing. No, I don't know if that's true or if it's just a joke, but either way, it cracks me the hell up.
It's good.
It's amazing. So, your turnip prices are quite high, I see. What you knew?
Your dodo code.
I'm going to get your Nook points. But it's so you haven't paid rent. But it's amazing. So yeah, there's this whole it's a whole thing, and I really like because the trauma gets later in probably the best codec call in the game. Naomi and Snake have this really deep conversation about their histories and parents. This is after you've been captured. Spoiler alert! After the sniper wolf fight, which happens after after you beat Psycho Mantis.
Yes.
So during that conversation, Snake talks about how he learned that Big Boss was his father, or he was a clone of him. I don't think he knew he was a clone of him. He just thought he was his father.
I don't think he does at that point, yeah.
Yeah. And Big Boss, I don't think in Metal Gear 2 he says, "I'm your father." I think that might have happened like retconny. I have to double check that. But and that affected him. That's kind of like haunted him, and that's part of the reason why he left FOX-HOUND after the mission in Metal Gear Solid 2.
Right.
So I just wanted to dwell on that because it's a really cool moment, and it really humanizes Snake and make you realize that like the things that you do in the game like actually affect him from a plot standpoint, not necessarily like a gameplay standpoint, but plot wise. So Devon, you take out Psycho Mantis. You run up to this long underground corridor, and Meryl gets shot real bad multiple times by a sniper rifle.
Oh, yeah. Like, I think she gets shot like 3 times. 3 or 4.
In most cases, you think she would die from, like, bleeding out. From high caliber bullets piercing her body. And so the only logical answer is to run all the way back to the first building and go get your own sniper rifle.
Right, Rex. Yeah.
So this is the first instance, or at least egregious instance of backtracking, which is going through the building you're just in, all the way back to building 1, going to the B2 floor, go to the barracks, get the sniper rifle, get the diazepam, which you did not use when you fought her, which is insane to me.
No, I did not.
So how did your experience with her fight go?
Yeah, it was not fun. So the diazepam is a medication that you can take to stable the sniper rifle because it's only scoped in first person and there's sort of realistic swaying. You can take this drug to calm it down, which makes the fight bearable, I would say.
Yeah. And
I did not have that.
I feel like I could say with confidence this is probably my least favorite boss fight in the game.
You think so?
Just because every time it feels like you shoot her, then she shoots you, and it's really hard to avoid getting shot. And every time you're hit, your aim in first person just freaks out, and you have to completely reposition, reorient yourself.
That's the most frustrating part.
And during that time, you can still take damage, which really frustrated me. And I'm sure, especially if you're not taking the diazepam and having stable aim, you finally got a bead on her, and all of a sudden your aim's flipped all around.
Yep.
And it's just like a target practice fight. Like, it's not really that complex.
I mean, it's interesting because I think the second Sniper Wolf fight is actually probably easier than the original one, especially since you can use, Nikita's or Stinger or whatever.
Yeah, you have more
the Stinger.
methods
Nikita at that point.
fight. Yeah.
Yeah.
So after this fight, Snake gets captured. Sniper Wolf leaves her mark on you. Wow. And you go through, which is like the start of the back half of the game, which starts with you being tortured by Revolver Ocelot. So this is...
Torture's a fair way to put that.
It's kind of amazing to me because it's torture in two senses. It's like
I love it. Like, I hate it, but at the same time, it's so clearly intentional that that's how it was designed. And that it's brilliant.
It also completely shatters the fourth wall again.
Yes,
he says you need to press the circle button really fast to regain your health before time runs out. He's like, don't cheat, because I will know if you're using a cheat to auto-fire to get through this. And if you die, it's game over. And it's funny because right before you're captured, Mei Ling calls you and goes, Snake, you should save your game. And Snake's like, huh? And she's like, I just have a feeling something bad's going to happen. And it's because of this.
We're going to play a game, Snake. And we'll find out what kind of man you really are. When the pain becomes too great to bear, just give up and your suffering will end. But if you do, the girl's life is mine. Press the circle button repeatedly to regain your strength. When you've had enough, press the select button to submit. When your life reaches 0, the game is over. There are no continues, my friend. Don't even think about using auto-fire, or I'll know.
And so there's this whole thing where you need to mash the crap out of the circle button to keep yourself alive while Snake's getting electrocuted. And it's actual torture because your hand is on fire from all the button mashing.
I mean, this is no Mario Party, right? Like some of the Mario Party games where you have to mash the buttons, it's like, oh, this is fucking easy. But this game, it's like you genuinely have to, fighting game style as just da-da-da-da-da on
you have to go nuts, and it gets harder and harder, and there's this whole thing of the pain's too much, press select to continue, and I'm ashamed to admit it, but my first time playing through this game, I submitted to the torture because I just could not, my fat thumbs, I just could not button mash.
See, I don't use my thumbs for button mashing segments like that. I use my pointer finger, and I kind of put it on top of the controller, like it's a mouse almost.
All right.
Yeah.
This is some tech. I mean, I did it this time, and wasn't
you have
easy.
to go through it. I know Darren and I talked about this, but there may be a way to get it through in one cycle. But after that, you get thrown in prison. You have to. There's several ways to escape, but the most common one is to call Otacon. And in both of our experiences, you have to go through the torture segment a second time.
Yes.
So yeah.
And so we have this really goofy escape from the
when
torture
the guard literally has to take a shit. I mean, that's the. So I have a question about this. Is it literally just the guard being like, I have to poop now? Or does Otacon have some kind of magic where he makes the guard poop?
This guard, there's conversations about how the genome soldiers have had genetic and psychiatric training to be perfect soldiers, and if you play this game, you're like, these guys suck. They die in 3 shots, their vision is terrible, their memory is terrible, and if you play through the game, there are moments where either they fall asleep, they sneeze and get sick, which actually distracts them and temporarily gets rid of their vision code. When they go achoo, their vision code disappears and you can sneak past them. And there's this whole thing, and this guy has diarrhea and has the runs, and so there's this whole thing about how this genome soldier project has failed. So this guy has to poop, and what if I told you, don't forget him? Don't forget. He'll be back.
So this is a pretty interesting sequence. You did it the same way I did it, right? Where you hid under the bed, because Otacon comes in, he gives you a couple of things, including ketchup and a handkerchief, which becomes semi-important later. and the guard runs to go poop. You hide under the bed. He comes back. He's like, "Oh my God, where'd he go?" Then you come back in, you beat him up, and you run out.
Yeah, and it's pretty hilarious. And then there's this whole thing of where if you don't manage to knock him out, or if he gets too close to the door, he'll just close the door and be like, "Screw you." And if Otacon gives you ketchup and a ration, and he's like, Snake's like, "What the hell, man? Get me out of here." And he's like, "Sorry, it's the best I can do." And then if you later talk to Otacon, he's like, "Oh man, I thought you would figure out my plan." And basically, I might be thinking Metal Gear Solid 3, but I think you can give the guard the ration, and then he might let his guard down.
Interesting.
And you can escape. I might be misremembering this, but the other intention is you use the ketchup to make it look like Snake's died. Like, you use the ketchup, it makes like a blood stain, and you lay in it, and the guard's like, "Oh my God, he died!" And he runs up to see you, and from there you knock him out. Oh, it's so goofy. So after you escape, you need to go through the towers, and very unnecessarily long sequence.
Oh God, yeah, one of my least favorite sequences in the game.
So there's this whole chase where guards are chasing you, and the method I told you that I used was I threw
stun grenades
because when the stun grenade goes off in Metal Gear Solid 1, every guard will be incapacitated, regardless,
just like the chaff grenades with electronics and cameras. Yeah,
and you just keep running, keep going upstairs, and you get to the top, and it's done. Liquid shows up in a Hind D, and you have to use this really gimmicky rope sequence where you descend through the tower on the rope while Liquid's doing strafing shots at you. And then you have to run across another tower and go down. Elevator's not working, run down. Stairwell's broken, go back up and fight Liquid with the stinger. And so, you have to fight the Hind D, which some people really like this fight because it's like so.
I kind of hated 3D. This fight, to be honest.
It takes a surprisingly long time.
Yes, it does.
I also, everyone in the chat who's snaking, I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, the Hind D fight, I don't really have a lot to say. It's kind of neat because it uses the 3D space, and it's one of the fights that really takes advantage, at least for Metal Gear Solid 1 for PS1, takes advantage of first-person aiming. But
that's fair. One of my issues with the stinger, though, is as soon as you pull it out, very similar to the sniper rifle, as soon as you pull it out, you're locked into the first-person aiming. So you have to constantly be switching back between, no item and then the stinger when you want to shoot the helicopter or the Hind D. I think it would be a nice change if when you hit square, then it would take you into that first-person mode. Just because it's a little bit frustrating having to constantly swap off of it to move around and get better positioning.
Yeah, and the only other note I have for this fight is during the Twin Snakes, the cutscene for this, Liquid shoots a missile, Snake jumps off the missile and pushes off of it, and fires the last stinger shot to take down the Hind D.
Beautiful.
Just wanted to point that out.
But he's not dead.
He's not dead. Totally survives. They mentioned how they saw a parachute, and Snake's like, dang. And then you have... I included the elevator battle, but it's not really a fight, so this is also stolen from Metal Gear 2, where you enter elevator and the weight limit goes off, and Snake's like, Otacon, how much do you weigh? And he's like, it also went off when I went on there. I only weigh this much. And they figure out how much the average, really fit person weighs.
Yeah.
You figure out there's a bunch of people with stealth camo on the elevator with you.
Otacon just decides randomly, instead of, right when you meet him, that I'm going to go back and look for these other stealth suits. But there were 5 of them, and oh my God, now they're all gone. So.
And then it's all these guards are like, you're finished, Snake.
Yeah.
And you could just... It's actually hysterical to me is that you can... No, I'm thinking of the later elevator encounter. But
I saw that in your notes that you can kick them off. I wasn't able to do that.
I did it really consistently.
In this one, Yeah, in this one you just kind of spin around with the
you just
assault rifle.
go in circles with the FAMAS and it gets them. It's really funny, and that's kind of it.
But these are some of the kind of mini boss type enemies where they go down. I'm not sure how many cycles they have, but it's not the
like
traditional 3 shots. Yeah, they have a couple of rounds before they actually die and drop either ammo or.
Yeah, and also, if it seems like we had long stretches of more conversation between bosses, and now all of a sudden it's just going boss, boss, boss,
right?
Because that's how the game's paced.
Yeah,
this whole back half is big cutscene with the torture sequence. Immediately jumps to just going, okay, boss fight, boss fight, boss fight,
yes,
boss fight. So right after you get out of the elevator, Ocelot, or not Ocelot, I'm going to keep always saying that, Otacon begs you. First, he asks if you think love can bloom on a battlefield, which totes can, everyone. It can happen.
I wonder who he's in love with.
He loves him some Sniper Wolf, because, I mean,
yes,
did you see that green hair?
Yeah.
And
that's my question. You know, he keeps saying to Snake, like, oh, she's nice, just give her a chance. When did these two ever get an opportunity to converse?
Well, if you do codec calls with Otacon and you listen to in some of the cutscenes that in the codec calls he has about this topic,
yes,
he mentions that they've been captured for like a couple days. Like this takeover on Shadow Moses Island has happened for a few days, and that she's like the only person there that treated him well. And then apparently he looked after the dogs on the base, and because of that, she like took a liking to him.
Okay. Huh.
I don't know. It seems really like a one-sided romance where Otacon like is infatuated with her.
I mean, it does, because she does not mention him at all. Literally the only time she mentions him is when she's about to die. She says, like, Otacon, get my gun. Yeah. So I can die with
Let me die with my gun. So this is a neat fight. This is kind of like I said in my notes, this is the most emotional fight in the game / series, because her death is treated with such gravitas. It has like a really beautiful song. I think it's The Best Is Yet to Come is the song. It's the credits theme as well.
She certainly gets the most backstory out of all these, robot mavericks. FOX-HOUND members.
Sniper Wolf, also very Mega Man X. Yes. And she, I don't remember much of her backstory prior to the replay. I was surprised how involved she was with Big Boss.
Yeah.
I really appreciated that this playthrough. Like, she has this whole story about how she was like a no-name rebel. She met Big Boss. He gave her a purpose, taught her how to snipe, and she like discovered herself through that. And I was like, oh shit, like this is actually like really good. This is good story material.
Definitely.
I really enjoyed it.
Like Psycho Mantis don't really get that.
He kind of has a thing of like how he never used his powers for good. He killed his father.
Well, yeah.
But he's so anime, and there's more for him later down the line.
Is there really?
I'm not going to spoil it, but
that's all I needed to hear.
Yeah. So the Sniper Wolf fight in general, I like this one a lot more because it's a more open space. There's more cover for you to use. You mentioned using the Nikita, which is like the optimal strategy for just freaking firing. You can use your night vision goggles. You can see her breath behind trees to know where she is.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think it's a pretty solid fight. It's not my favorite fight, but I like it a lot more than that first one.
Everyone's here now. Okay, hero. Set me free.
Goodbye. So we have two different elevator descents, which is like
back to back almost.
Yeah. I kind of like how this sequence, it's very short, but it really delivers a sense of like going into the belly of the beast.
Ooh, see, I think it should have been one elevator, because if you don't remember...
I agree with that.
One elevator, a little fight, a second elevator where your radar is disabled and there's mines next to the elevator for some reason.
Yeah.
I don't understand why.
Because they totally knew you were coming.
Well, yes, and in the backtracking section we'll get to very, very shortly, For some reason, it makes sense in your initial descent because the initial descent, originally, you have the elevator battle too, and then in the second elevator, you have the call with, I think, Master, who
Master
talks about
Miller,
Naomi.
he builds up this whole plot about how Naomi Hunter isn't Naomi Hunter.
Right. And you also see ravens kind of, signifying that Vulcan Raven's going to come back.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that you have these little intermediary segments where it's just sort of Snake on an elevator.
Yeah.
But in the backtracking segment, they keep those.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that. That's probably the weakest part of this whole game, and it's widely criticized.
I will say it's criticized, but thankfully it doesn't take too long.
Yeah. So you punch people. If you're like me, you punch people off an elevator. All is well. Master Miller reveals Naomi Hunter's not who she is. The operation's kind of getting hijacked in the background a little bit. Things are going a little haywire. Naomi's getting tortured and stuff.
Then you meet the boy.
Then you re-meet Vulcan Raven with this big-ass freaking... Is that backpack just have, rounds in it for his minigun?
I mean, he's just... Yeah, it's a minigun, Gatling gun, something like that. I mean, he's just... And this man literally is so fucking buff that he does not take damage from bullets. Only explode. That is the only thing that will damage him.
Unless you're playing Twin Snakes, where you can just use the M9 tranquilizer to continually just pump them full of tranks. And
can you really?
Yeah.
That's almost a shame.
I mentioned this because a lot of people view this as the highlight of the game boss fight-wise, because this is one of the only fights that actually uses stealth as a mechanic. And, hey... Thank you, Sir Funkstain, for the nice comment. Thank you. I'm glad to be back. I don't think I'm too important, but I appreciate the gesture. But yeah, Vulcan Raven, this guy, I love that he's a huge vision cone. You need to use stealth. You can use tricks like knocking on the various containers to trick him. You can use the claymores.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yep. You can use claymores to lead him into traps. You can use C4, Nikita. I just think this is a really great fight. Although with the claymores, I found it was a bit too easy.
See, this is the boss I might have struggled with the most. I kept dying, but I was using the stinger for most of it, which you were saying earlier you didn't know you could damage him with.
I just didn't know.
Yeah. I think this is another case where this boss takes 3, maybe, too many shots, 2 or 3 too many shots. It just goes on a little bit too long, and since there are so many of these fights back to back, your ration supply can be a little bit low.
It's very low.
There's one ration. Yeah, there's one ration in that room, but I ended up fighting it with half health and 2 rations. So you could go down pretty quickly because when this guy targets onto you, sometimes you can get sort of stun locked. This is an issue I found. I'm not sure about you, Darren, but sometimes, so when you get hit in this game, you sort of fall on your back. It's kind of similar to a fighting game.
Yeah.
And then you have to get back up and you have a small window of invincibility. Sometimes I've found maybe you have to sort of mash the directional buttons on the analog stick, but sometimes it takes longer to get up and your invincibility frames run out and you can get kind of stun locked on the ground.
Yeah, you definitely can.
And keep getting hit, and that can happen in this boss just because he's shooting like a Gatling minigun at you, so a bunch of bullets at once.
Yeah, it's I can see that being frustrating. I found once I started using claymores, I was like, oh my god, this fight is ending super quickly because they do tons of damage to them.
Yes, they do.
And I had so many because in the game, you can just crawl over claymores and you automatically pick them up. Remember
it's really the only use for claymores that at least I was able to
unless the only other use case is planting them in a guard path and then running away and then they just walk into it.
Sure.
Which, I mean, there's a lot of ways to mess with the guards, but because the stealth is so minimal in this game, there's not really a lot of reason to explore it. Later games, most messing of the time, with the guards is more fun.
Once I got the silencer, most of the time I tried to sneak by, or if I thought it was too difficult, just use the silencer SOCOM.
Yeah, definitely. But
or the stinger, which I found out you can snipe them from across the map with. And by the way, do you know what I found out at the very end of this game? I'm not sure if you know this, Darren, but you can use the stinger to take down the gun.
What?
Yeah.
You can take out all the gun cameras with it?
Mm-hmm. They
Man.
respawn when you come back into the area, but you
Yeah.
can take them.
That's crazy. I've never done that. I've never known that. Always something new in this game. That's crazy.
Definitely.
So I already talked about how this fight's much worse in Twin Snakes because you can just first-person aim and just trade shots with him.
Yeah.
Also, it's important to point out in Twin Snakes, your health bar is maxed out from the start of the game.
Really? Okay, I did not know that.
So that really makes it a much, much easier, which I think kind of devalues the sense of progression.
No, I think so. I was going to say it's very small, but again, sort of going back to Zelda, you essentially get a heart container every time you fight a boss in this game. Slight more health. And also, which the game doesn't tell you because there's a little animation of your health bar growing bigger. Incrementally, sometimes when
And
you
you get
beat
more
bosses,
ammo.
I was just going to say you get more ammo, which is kind of cool. But it's small, and the game is clearly designed around it. So,
It's not going to really dramatically.
No, it doesn't really make that much of a difference, but it is one of those things where it does feel like a small sense of progression, which I really enjoy in game.
Another follower, and I just realized my issue here. I'm going to quickly adjust this while Devon, thank you for the follow. I didn't see your name because the chat's covering it. I have to move that lower. But I'm glad my follow alert is working, which is from Babylon. Don't watch it. Devon, do you want to talk about how metal Vulcan Raven's death is as he's monologuing to you while being eaten alive by ravens?
Dude, I mean, I don't even know what else to say. The man's ravens come back and just eat him. And when you have to go back to that area later in the game, the ravens are just swirling around there, and his fucking corpse and Gatling gun are just sitting on.
Yeah,
like Vulcan Raven he's crazy, dude. That man is a monster, and just like the classic cinematic thing.
Oh shit! I reset. So I moved the chat down. I've lost the chat for right now. Sorry, everyone, that you for watching this in the future. I just edited that so when future alerts come, I can read them out because I had the chat blocking it. That's my bad. Kinks like this will be worked out for the future. So apologies to future audiences who lose the chat. But yeah, Vulcan Raven, crazy metal death. What a guy. Favorite Mega Man Maverick. I wish I got his Vulcan gun.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
So Devon.
Yes, Darren.
This is it. This is
the best part of the game.
There's two parts I want to talk about here. First of all is the plot twist no jitsu of Snake. Actually, we'll get into that later because that happens after. So Snake listens to a conversation of Ocelot and Liquid Snake talking about how, oh dang, we can't activate Metal Gear. And Ocelot's like, boss, what do we do? Remember that time I killed the DARPA chief? Whoopsie daisies. Really messed up our plan, huh?
Right.
And
you learn about Decoy Octopus.
Yeah, and you learn like, oh shit, the DARPA chief at the beginning of the game was Decoy Octopus. I've killed all the members of FOX-HOUND except Revolver Ocelot and Liquid Snake. And you have to deactivate Metal Gear Rex, you need to use the same card key, which falls, so you climb all the way up Metal Gear Rex to get to the control room, insert the PAL key, climb all the way back down, get the PAL key, go back up, activate it, go back down, go to the furnace room. Do you go to the furnace room first?
You go to the freezer where you fight Raven.
Which now has guards there, which suddenly populated. So you go there, go back all the way up, go all the way around, back to the control room, put in the PAL key, go back up all the way
further.
Further. So you have to go through the elevators again. Claymores are reset. Cameras are reset. Guards are reset. You need to go get steamed and then quickly rush through the freezer area to get and go back all the way up that climbing sequence to activate the last PAL key.
Right.
And this sequence sucks.
Oof. Yeah, it's not fun. It's like I said earlier, it wasn't as bad as I expected just because I had heard so many people complain about it. And
how long did it take you?
It's just backtracking. I don't know, half an hour maybe. Might have been.
I found it took me like almost an hour, and I was getting really annoyed to that.
The one frustrating thing to me is that, first of all, there's no notification because Otacon describes like the PAL key as some kind of alloy that changes its form in different temperatures, which is why you have to go to the ice and fire room.
Yeah.
Yeah, video
That
games.
totally unjustified furnace right really
Right, and
close
the
to a
strange freezer that's just one room. Like I don't quite understand.
They're
But
freezing nukes.
by the way, so this is a PS1 game, and there are 2 discs to this game, and this backtracking segment has you go through the entirety of disc 2 again, because disc 2 starts once you get to the furnace room. So you're entering from the back of the
disc
front.
2 starts. I may be incorrect. You might know this. You might actually have that.
I
right.
do, because I told you a little bit, if just to ease my experience a little bit, if I got stuck or on a boss or something like that, I had a PS1 walkthrough in the back, and I saw this 2 starts right once you kill Sniper Wolf and you go into the furnace room in that little hall.
Okay.
So you're basically going through the entirety of disc 2 again.
Which is like not that much content.
No,
Most
it's not
of the
that
content
much.
is on disc 1.
But anyway, back to what I was saying.
Strange Freezer must have been the robot master that didn't make the cut.
No, that's Vulcan Raven's weapon. Strange Freezer.
Strange Freezer.
Strange Freezer.
Why is this here?
Anyway,
yeah.
so the game does not notify you when the PAL card has changed form. You just have to kind of like mess around in the
You have to
menu
check
a while.
the menu.
And I don't quite know what triggers it. It seems random to me, but maybe it's a specific amount of time, because when you go in,
I think
you
it's
check.
time.
It's probably time, because when you go in and check, you have the normal yellow one. You go into the freezer room, and you're like, okay. I mean, you're clearly supposed to go to the ice room here.
I
Why is this not
believe
blue
if
now?
you have it equipped, you'll see the picture change.
So that's how you can tell if it's changed or not.
Yeah.
That's what I did. But if you have it equipped when you walk into the room, you still need to stay there for a minute or two.
Yeah.
Just walk around and equip and de-equip it and keep checking until the picture changes, from yellow to blue or yellow to red.
It's not a great sequence. In Twin Snakes, this is probably the biggest area of improvement. In Twin Snakes, they included all the different environments in that Metal Gear Rex room. So there's like a pipe you can shoot that steams it and cools it. And I think there's like something like a canister you can explode that creates heat. And so you can do this whole sequence in like a minute, which
that's nice.
Greatly improves the whole experience. Yeah, but
very Metroid. It reminds me a lot of. I mean, this game came out afterwards, but have you played Metroid Prime?
Of course.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the artifact hunt at the end of Metroid Prime.
Yeah, it's kind of like this weird backtracking thing, an excuse to go through the whole game again.
I didn't even really think about it until this podcast, but this game is very Nintendo in design a lot of the times, and this is kind of a Nintendo thing where it haven't really done it recently, but that very last instance of backtracking.
Yeah. It's rough. So after this, you put in all the keys, and all of a sudden, plot twist no jitsu, Metal Gear Rex activates. It's now armed and ready to fire nukes, and Snake's like, what? And then Liquid, in the best plot twist ever, takes off his sunglasses and lets down his hair and reveals that he's been Master Miller the whole time.
Poor fool. Who are you anyway? I'll tell you everything you want to know. If you come where I am, that is. Where are you? Very close by.
Snake, that's not Master Miller.
Campbell, you're too late.
Master Miller's body was just discovered at his home. He's been dead for at least 3 days. I didn't know because my codec link with Master was cut off. But Mei Ling said his transmission signal was coming from inside the base.
So who is it?
Snake, you've been talking to...
me, dear brother. Liquid, how the... You've served your purpose. You may die now.
And before he does it, you can tell, because he's sort of he's saying, yeah, Snake, this was intentional. We did this so that you'd activate it instead of deactivating it. And his accent slips a little bit. I don't know if you noticed. The voice actor slips in and out of the two characters, so you get a little bit of Liquid Snake's hammy British accent before Snake realizes that he's Liquid.
And I want to point out,
it's kind of beautiful.
I want to point out two things here. First of all, is that Master Miller is actually a character from Metal Gear 2 who's radio support. So if you were someone who played that game, you would be like, "Oh, Master Miller's my bro." Like you would totally be like floored by this twist, perhaps. And it's this idea that Liquid's been impersonating him the whole time. And number two is, it's kind of neat how they already have a twist of a traitor where it's revealed that Naomi hates Snake for killing Gray Fox, who is her adoptive older brother. And she basically lied and conned her way into FOX-HOUND so that she could be a part of this project called FOX-Die, which is like a nanomachine-based virus that can kill certain people with a heart attack. Oh, thank you for the follow. And I see that the follow thing is broken, so I'll have to fix that after the stream because I can't properly thank you for following. So if you're still there, comment in the chat. I can thank you properly.
Yeah.
Till I fix it.
But anyway, it's a death note.
It's a death note. Yeah, it just gives you a heart attack. That's true.
I pretend like it's a heart attack, and it targets certain people. It's a virus that only kills the people it wants it to kill.
Kira!
So it's a death note.
But, yeah, so Master Miller was Liquid Snake the whole time, and the most contrived thing ever is how they tried to kill you all this time, but it was all just a means to an end. So
what I don't understand is, did they not care that like Sniper Wolf and Vulcan Raven and all these other guys?
Liquid is shown to be this whole game reminds me a lot of Die Hard.
That's fair. Yeah.
And Liquid is like the most Hans Gruber ass villain ever.
Oh, he's evil.
He's so mustache twirling and just does not have any regard for his men and just wants his goals to be achieved.
I mean, it reminded me of Austin Powers. Have you seen the Austin Powers films? It reminded me of Dr. Evil just because there's one or two moments where he's talking about the money he's going to get for Metal Gear Rex, and he literally goes, $1 billion.
Die hard with a revengeance. Oh, it's good. Fignite, you're on fire tonight, my friend.
You are.
It's just it's so goofy. And so Liquid Snake's whole plan is to use to recreate Outer Heaven, which is big bosses like military nation, which is the soldiers are the nation. Soldiers will always have a place. They go into conflict. That conflict creates new tragedy and like war orphans, and they get brought into Outer Heaven and they become the next generation of soldier. And it's like this vicious cycle that repeats itself. And Liquid Snake wants to basically recreate Outer Heaven on Shadow Moses.
Which is not totally explained, by the way, in this game.
No.
You hear that he shares boss's dreams, and you hear the words Outer Heaven once in a very dramatic tone. That's super anime, and you don't know what the hell that means. But
also,
I was not sure that that's what that was.
Also, the point where he is shirtless and hops into Metal Gear Rex, I love how he and Snake have this back and forth conversation with Snake pointing a gun at him.
Yeah.
And then he just hops in the thing, and Snake's like, and couldn't shoot him.
There's the thing in the walkthrough I was watching a little bit before that. So Liquid, right after you leave the control center and you're on that little walkway, and you have to walk a little bit to the right before you initiate the cutscene with Liquid.
Yeah.
Liquid's model is just standing there, so you can shoot him and you can fire stingers at him, but obviously it just does no damage. Just kind of entertaining.
But no, thank you. Oh, morning in Europe. Thank you for joining us so early. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. So Liquid jumps in Metal Gear Rex, and all hope seems lost because, oh my god, Metal Gear Rex, the ultimate weapon.
Right.
How could you possibly
It's got a chain gun, Darren.
It's a railgun, and he's got miniguns, and he's got like rocket launchers and
laser things. You know, he's got it all.
He does have lasers. I forgot about that.
And he stomps on you like any good mech boss in a game.
So you have to take out the radar dish and throw a lot of chaff grenades to stop him from just bombarding you with rockets and killing you. Which I died a couple times on this fight. And Ray Fox, Frank Yeager, the man, shows up. He has, out of nowhere, this crazy gun on his arm.
Yeah, where did that come from? He just had a sword before.
Yeah, I don't know. The sword's like gone. And he does a bunch of cool flips, and he holds off Metal Gear Rex by himself while talking to Snake about Naomi and how
he killed Naomi's parents.
Yeah, and how he's haunted by her, and he only like basically took her in out of guilt.
Right.
And then later that guilt sort of like destroyed him, and it's like really tragic, and he tells Snake to tell her. And then he unfortunately gets crushed by... Before he gets crushed, he's holding...
He asked you to kill him.
Yeah, it's that sequence that you mentioned where you can aim the stinger at Liquid, and if you go to fire, Snake says, "I can't do it!" Yep. And he won't fire, and you have to sit there and watch as Gray Fox is crushed to death by Liquid Snake. Then you have
the same boss fight again.
The exact same boss fight. Is there any differences between round 1 and 2?
I think it's just like most of the boss in the game, where as they take more damage, they get more aggressive. Their attack patterns, there's less downtime in between them. That's the only thing I found.
And I would argue this is one of the best Metal Gear fights in the series. And
you think so?
I don't say that as this standard that's really hard to clear. I find these fights are really messy in these games. Particularly the fights with the Metal Gear of whatever variety. But I do like that there's a lot of moves, and it feels like this, Goliath versus David type of fight where the odds are stacked against you and you need to, use a lot of resources. But it's clunky. Grenades. It's clunky because of the gameplay mechanics.
Yes.
And man, that laser really hurts.
Yes, it does. And I was complaining about this a little bit earlier today, not on the podcast, but there is an attack. So the chaff grenades, it neuters all of his attacks except for this one where he sends out these 3 rockets at you. And sometimes the pattern
it specifically messes with that one. But the thing is, sometimes it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't really work. And it seems almost impossible to dodge sometimes.
Yeah, so I found when I did this fight, I just had to go chaff grenade, stinger, chaff grenade, stinger.
Oh, yeah.
It just took forever.
Totally, yes. That's exactly what I did.
Yeah, so it is very doable, but I like the fight, like I said, but it's not the most fun.
No, that's coming up, right?
So... after you blow it up, Snake gets knocked out, and despite the fact that the cockpit or the mouth of Metal Gear Rex, which Metal Gear Rex does roar, because...
the dinosaur.
Despite you shooting directly to the cockpit, Liquid is A-okay, and he not only Snake's knocked out, he strips Snake, somehow gets him to the top of Metal Gear Rex, which is destroyed.
And Meryl.
Who he hid in Metal Gear.
Is that the idea? I didn't quite understand.
Either that or she must have been in a room nearby or something.
Yeah.
So this sequence is different because Meryl will still be here if you failed the torture and you gave in. But at the end, when you beat Liquid and you guys have your cool 90s movie fight scene where you're both shirtless fighting on top of this blown up robot when there's a nuclear strike coming in to blow up Shadow Moses. So it's the most cinematic ultimate final battle.
And a timer. There's a 3-minute timer.
And there's this whole... I wouldn't call it quite fighting game, but it's this whole thing of you have your punch kick combo, and Liquid has a couple different punches and kicks he can use and dodges, and a really damaging tackle that he loves to throw out. It's super contrived because the thing I love is he lets you have a last codec conversation with Colonel and everyone while he's monologuing about how he wants to surpass Big Boss and destroy him.
He does.
And he lets you call Colonel, and it's revealed that Jim Houseman, the Secretary of Defense, is behind all this shady shit with Shadow Moses Island, and that he's trying to cover it up now, so he's gonna nuke it.
Interesting.
Yeah, I agree, Fignat. This fight wouldn't get topped till the shirtless fights of the Yakuza series, because oh my god. All of them have an end with a shirtless fight somewhere, usually atop a really tall tower. So, Devon, how much do you love this boss fight? That took you how long?
I mean, it took me longer than it should have, but I do kind of love it. It's just so cheesy, but it's kind of wonderful. It's just one of those things. Normally, if this was in almost any other game, I would probably criticize these things, but I don't. Part of it's probably the voice acting because Liquid Snake. We talked about this in our own personal chats, but Liquid Snake is inexplicably British.
He,
I guess, just because he's
was
evil,
part
right?
of the SAS Special Forces, so I guess he grew up in Britain at some point, despite not being born.
But let's not pretend that they didn't just ask the voice actor, "You're a bad guy," and they decided to do a British accent.
Also, I want to point this out because every time a character that's really important is introduced, they have like a little credit that appears by their character model.
Right. Yeah.
So this does that for all the boss fights. It'll be like their name and the voice actor. And when we meet Liquid Snake for the first time, his is a fake name. And they did this so they don't reveal the plot twist of Master Miller and Liquid Snake having the same voice actor.
That's pretty awesome.
It's just like it's like Jim something, and I'm like, I remember looking at it, being like, "What? Did they get it wrong?" And I was like, "Oh my god, they just did that to frickin' cover up the plot twist." Amazing.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, but this sequence, I mean, gameplay wise, again, like most of the boss fights, probably takes a little bit too many hits. You don't have any rations or healing items, which is awesome from a narrative perspective, but at the same time, I mean, it can make it take a couple of tries.
Yeah.
And one of the big things is, so I believe, Darren, you were saying there are analog movements in some ports of this game, maybe. In the PC port, from what I found, it's only 8 directional. So when you're trying to line up this punch, kick, sometimes it can be a little hard to get the sweet spot. Sometimes you only get one punch, and then his invincibility frames will kick in, and you can't hit him anymore. So it can make the fight take longer than it should. Which, like I mentioned, there's a 3-minute timer because there's a bomb that's supposed to go off that's going to kill Meryl if you don't beat Liquid up quick enough. So again, there's issues, but at the same time, it's so hammy that it's wonderful.
So hammy, I can't help but love every second of it.
No, because I mean, Liquid is like he's like Iago, right? Like this Shakespearean-esque villain that's evil to be evil, and it's beautiful.
That's so true.
Yeah,
I love it. It's a great little final fight. As clunky as it may be and frustrating for players of 2020, I think I like it too much to knock it, and I think a remake would be so cool to see this fight redone with all the flair.
I think so too.
Could be done, but don't think that's the case. So right after this fight, if you succeeded in destroying your fingers to save Meryl in the torture, she is totally alive and good to go, and it's super lovey-dovey, and Snake's like, power of love, oh yeah. And
there's literally a line where, she's like, too bad we can't have like a love-making scene right now because it's about to blow up, and they're like, yeah, too bad.
Like, let's make love, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
You're like, Meryl, nukes are dropping. Like, come on, girl.
Snake.
Meryl. It started.
I must be heavy.
Looks like we're not gonna have a love scene after all.
Looks that way. Too bad.
It's actually ridiculous. But I would argue this scene is way better if she's dead. Because her body is still there, unconscious, but if you failed, when Snake goes over her and goes like, Meryl, and he sees that she's dead, and he like loses his shit.
Yeah.
And it's super chilling, and he's like, and it's kind of like sets in the lesson that like people like him don't deserve happy endings and stuff like that. And then it's a much more tragic scene. Also, oh my god, Snake or Liquid Snake has this whole like video game player guilt thing where he's like, so why did you come here, Snake? Like, you didn't have to come here. He's like, you enjoy the killing, that's why. and Snake's like, what? And he's like, are you denying it? You've already killed most of my men. And he's like, and he has like no excuse. And you're like, oh shit, I'm a monster.
Undertale.
So that's part of the reason to not try to kill so many people. Also, I'll say this because we're about to be finished with our conversation about this game. That guard, those two guards that are on the top balcony with Metal Gear Rex, those guys died like 8 times in my playthrough.
Oh, same. Yeah. Because they keep respawning, and you got to keep killing them when you go up and down and up and down.
And they're in the way.
Yeah, they are in the way. The way I took care of them is when I was going back up, I just shot a stinger from all the way across, which is apparently, a silent method of killing.
Hey, it works here. Won't work in later games.
Yeah.
But so during this sequence, if Meryl's alive, I don't properly remember. I believe you just do this escape sequence with Otacon, where you get in a car, you're on the back of a gun, you gotta shoot your way out, and Liquid, in the most video game ass way, despite being blown up in a Hind D, being blown up in Metal Gear Rex, falling to his death from atop Metal Gear Rex after being beaten up, it's not over yet, Snake.
He's back on a car.
He's in a car with a gun, and he's shooting you, and you have like this super 90s action movie shootout with him as you're driving away trying to get out of Shadow Moses. And
it's not great, to be
Devon,
honest, just because the depth perception is a little bit rough here.
In the Twin Snakes, you can just use first-person aiming to like really trivialize the sequence and just blast your way through it. But in this version, it's pretty clunky. So Devon, do you want to talk about the best set of line reads ever when the cars flip and Meryl and Snake are pinned by their car and Liquid is still alive and walking towards Snake?
There's more clunky line readings though, because I don't know if you noticed this. They're like at one point, the car is like flipped over, and Liquid is nowhere to be found, and Snake says like, has Liquid died? And Meryl's response is, I can't see him either.
So that might be just part of a general rougher localization.
Yeah.
Like this era of video games is notorious for having like really bad.
Oh, in this game is not too bad with it, but there are
it's
still
pretty good
moments. Yeah.
What I didn't mention this during my research, but it is important to note that in this instance, they had to match the flaps of the codec calls a lot of the time. So it's like anime production where they have to try to match the mouth movements as close as possible. So some line reads become awkward because you have to rush out a word real quick.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So there's a couple awkward pacing issues in codec calls.
I believe there's no lip syncing in the actual 3D cutscenes because that's just characters' heads moving very slow.
I mean, like I said, it doesn't really. There's not a lot of lip syncing outside of the codec calls. And the other thing with this too is that I'm sort of losing my train of thought, but essentially, there is a lot of instances where characters start and end sentences by saying another character's name. So, like, Colonel Cam will be like, what do you think of the situation? Snake? Snake, be careful. And it sounds super awkward, and it's not proper localization.
Yeah.
And that's a big bummer. But, the hope being in the future that, well, in Twin Snakes, this did get corrected. But for the time, this is well above the standard. This is not the enemy feel asleep. Which is Metal Gear 1 for the
all
enemies.
Your base are belong to us.
Yeah. But in my favorite line read ever, Liquid is about to shoot Snake lying on the ground.
Right.
And he's like, all of a sudden he's like, feels so good. And he's like, Fox. And then Snake just says, die.
I can't see him either.
Liquid's dead. Uh-oh.
Snake! Snake!
And then it's this huge thing of Liquid Snake dies from Fox-Die and is unable to kill Solid Snake, and you're able to get away. Snake has a last codec call with Colonel and Naomi, who they're like, hey, we're turning off the satellites, get out of there, no nukes are coming, get out of there, hide with, and Colonel's like, go have fun with my niece, get out of here. And Naomi's, and Snake's like, Naomi, like, how long do I have to live? Because, like, you made Fox-Die to kill me. Like, what's going to happen? And she's like, I don't know, Snake. Like, just live your life. And that's kind of, we kind of didn't go too deep into, like, reading between the lines and going to, like, the messages. But there is this whole message of, like, genetic supremacy, and that your entire personality and who you are is determined by your genetics and how
it's very strange.
Yeah, well, in Japan, like, they really buy into, like, beliefs of, like, your blood type, like, are critical. If you're like a O blood type, it says a lot about your personality, how you'll develop, and it's a big thing. And that's a huge theme here, especially with, like, Liquid's obsession with being the obsessive clone of Big Boss. And it's this idea that your genes don't determine who you are. Live your life to the fullest. War's bad. And I think the game, like, overall does a really great job of that. So,
I think so.
Devin, let's sum this up. We're gonna do two things. We're gonna sum this up about our overall thoughts. Would you recommend this game to someone in 2020? And then, because you didn't get a chance to watch it yet, and those of you who are live watching now, you get to see Devin's reaction to watching the final cutscene of the post-credit scene in Metal Gear Solid.
Right.
So, Devin, final thoughts.
Final thoughts. You know, the entire time I was playing this game, I mentioned a lot of Nintendo references, but at the same time, coincidental, because these two games came out in the same year, this game reminds me a lot of Half-Life 1.
Yeah.
It just, I don't know, the fact that these were two games that sort of took story-based gaming and cinematic experiences to another level in the medium, the fact that they still hold up today, I think there's still a ton of value that you can get out of Metal Gear Solid 1 and Half-Life 1. But it comes with the caveat that there are still some very clunky design decisions, and it is, while there are, you know, moments that it's like this is things, you know, these games are doing things that are 10, 15 years ahead of the rest of the industry. There's also stuff that it's like, yeah, this is clearly a game from 1999. So I would absolutely wholeheartedly recommend Metal Gear Solid 1, but you need to understand that even though it is touted as this masterpiece, which I think is understandable and fair, and to the game's credit, that at the same time there will be roadblocks, and there will probably be times where you get a little bit pissed off with the game. There are things that a remake could really assist with, but
too bad they didn't remake it, right?
Yeah, too bad Konami's no longer a company, right?
Too bad Twin Snakes didn't fully deliver.
Yes, yeah. Because I think Twin Snakes, well, I have not played it. It doesn't seem like a terrible game. It's contentious more than anything. I think you could have easily had a Resident Evil 1 situation here, where you sort of have a game that, I mean, I think it's fair to say that the GameCube remake of Resident Evil 1, I think it was the same year, and the GameCube remake of Resident Evil 1 essentially replaced the original.
Yeah.
I mean,
and it's crazy to think, because this is the same year that the original Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater released too, in 2004.
And wow.
comparing the gameplay mechanics of those two games it's a gulf that is cannot be filled. It is crazy.
Yes. So play Metal Gear Solid. I think if you have not played a game in the series before, I mean, Darren, you can correct me here if you think otherwise, because this is the only one I have experience with. But I say, why not start from 1 and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 if you want to go with 5.
I was gonna say this ahead of time. Don't be like me.
No,
Learn
don't
from
go
my
4, 3,
mistakes.
2, 1, 5.
So I've talked about this. I talked about it in the Gaming Pilgrimage podcast of yesteryear. I've talked about this with many of my friends. I played 4 in 2008 first because it was like the most highly rated game ever at the time. And I was like, oh my god, I got a PS3, killer app. Didn't understand any of it. Bought the Essentials collection. Went to go play Metal Gear Solid 1. And I was like, oh man, top-down camera? I'm not dealing with this. Went to play Metal Gear Solid 2. I was like, oh man, top-down camera? I'm not dealing with this. Metal Gear Solid 3, I'm like, ooh, third-person camera, because this is the Subsistence re-release where it has a third-person camera. And I, like a psychopath, played 4, 3, 2, 1. Don't do that.
No.
Do by order of release. Save yourself so much confusion. As to what you were saying, Devon, I totally think from a story standpoint and its overall place in gaming history, Metal Gear Solid holds its place. I enjoyed my replay that I did in 2020 way more than my original playthrough in 2009. I think in some ways this game's kind of held up. In others, I definitely see the areas where they took the formula and grew. And I'm glad they did. I think people who say this is like the best game in the series,
I think they haven't played it for, 7 years, 10 years maybe.
Yeah, and Fignet, if you're with colorblind, that would be very challenging for some games in the series, especially like 3 could be really difficult because camo is very big in that game.
Yes.
I'd absolutely recommend going back to Metal Gear Solid 1. And hey, if COVID 2 happens, you have a great excuse
Electric Boogaloo,
to go through it. So before we wrap up for this first episode, we're going together. We're going to go through the post-credit sequence.
No.
Yes,
that's okay, because I'm assuming there's... I hear...
Those two are still alive. The Vector? Yes, sir. Fox Dive should become activated soon. Right on schedule. Yes, sir. I recovered all of Rex's dummy warhead data. No, sir. My cover is intact. Nobody knows who I really am. Yes, the DARPA chief knew my identity, but he's been disposed of. Yes, the inferior one was the winner after all. That's right. Until the very end, Liquid thought he was the inferior one. Yes, sir, I agree completely. It takes a well-balanced individual such as yourself to rule the world. No, sir. No one knows that you were the third one, Solidus. What should I do about the woman? Yes, sir. I'll keep her under surveillance. Yes. Thank you. Goodbye, Mr. President.
Oh my god. Beautiful. So you're Liquid?
Pardon?
Solid is Liquid?
Solid is indeed Liquid. That is the plot twist no jitsu that happens there. So
and there's a third. I mean, the third snake. I don't know if I assumed it was the president. But when they say there are 8 clones of Big Boss and we used 6 of them to make us stronger, it's like, well, they wouldn't have said that, if there wasn't going to be at least one more.
Oh, yeah.
The solidest snake there is.
Oh my god. Fig that, you're just on top of it tonight. But this twist was like, oh god, like Ocelot was like this triple agent the whole time, and he killed the DARPA chief on purpose, and oh my god, the president is behind this conspiracy.
Yeah.
Also, it inadvertently has this terrible plot twist where it's a case of, you're like, wait a minute. If Solidus is a clone of Big Boss and he's the president, doesn't he just look like Big Boss and he's the president?
Yeah, that, I mean, also, so my question is, does Liquid Snake know that he's actually Solid Snake?
No. So that bit there just meant that Liquid was actually the dominant clone.
Right. No, I understand that.
Yeah.
So does Liquid know that he's the dominant clone or no?
No.
He does not.
He had no idea.
So that still is his motivation, the fact that, you know, he thinks you took everything from him. And
even from birth, my fate was determined by my genetics. So I think that is a beautiful way to wrap up this first episode of the Gaming Pilgrimage, where we have gone over the legendary Metal Gear Solid. I want to thank all of you watching live and watching this on YouTube in the future.
Thank you so much, guys. Yeah.
And, of course, a huge thank you to my wonderful co-host, Devon, from Emblemcast, who has taken the time to soldier his way through Metal Gear Solid 1, which is...
I had a great time.
I'm glad you did. And, Devon, is there anything you would like to shout out to the people watching this?
I think if you enjoy Darren and I's dynamic on a podcast, then absolutely check out Emblemcast.
That's fair.
Because
that's very fair.
30-something episodes, 40-something episodes of Darren and I talking for hours about video games.
Very usually specifically about Fire Emblem, but you never know. Definitely check it out.
You never know. And I'm sure you will see more of us doing stuff together in the future.
Definitely.
And Darren, there's something I have to tell you.
What is it?
The raven on my head. Thirst for more metal.
So, I guess I'll announce this now to those of you watching before we wrap up. The next game for the Gaming Pilgrimage is going to be Ace Combat 7 Shattered Skies. It is a game, I love the Ace Combat series, and I've never had an outlet for it because up until this point, my platforms have always been about RPGs.
Right.
And I'm super excited to talk about another game series I'm really, really passionate about. So I hope you'll stay tuned for that. That should be going live within a couple weeks, so probably near the end of June. I will announce on social media at Twitter at Gaming Pilgrim, where you can find updates about the show. There, you'll also get notified if you follow the stream here on Twitch. And if you subscribe, you'll also help support the show, and you'll be able to find that information as well when we go live. So be sure to follow and stick around and tune in for Ace Combat 7, because, hey, thank you for the follow. I still need to fix that. I'm dying inside seeing I can't see the name. But thank you for the follow. Really appreciate it. And we, if you missed parts of this, you can find this on YouTube the following couple of days after it goes live on Twitch. And if you subscribe to the Gaming Pilgrimage podcast RSS feed on your podcasting platforms of choice, and thanks, Big Nat, I appreciate it. And thank you for letting me know it was you, so I could probably thank you for the follow. And yes, so if you, right now, the RSS feed will not be updated with this right away. It will be in the future. So if you subscribe now, you'll be able to get that in the future for future episodes if you want to listen to this on the go. I think that about does it for us today. Thank you everyone for joining. Have a lovely rest of your evening. Stay safe out there. The world is a crazy place. And I wish everyone the best. Thank you so much. Devon, thank you. Everyone.
Thank you, Darren.
Thank you. Thank you. And goodbye, everybody. Thank you.